Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Tuesday Night Live. So as you know, the last couple weeks, I've been doing a poll on my Instagram story every Tuesday afternoon to see what you guys want to talk about. And it was very close today. So simulation theory won when I pulled it at 4 p.m. And then since 4 p.m., one of the other options, which was soul contracts, uh, started to take the lead. So let me know in the comments if you guys want to talk about soul contracts next week or if we want to do the poll again. And also, I want to acknowledge, I can see who votes for what, you guys. Okay. So I have noticed that a lot of the OGs, a lot of the people who comment, a lot of the people who engage, a lot of the people who repost, we're voting for the personal life section for my personal life updates. So I see you guys, and maybe you'll win next week because that was good. You guys were in the lead until time went on, and then the simulation theory took over. So that is what we are meant to talk about tonight on this Tuesday Night Live. So there's a couple of different things to talk about with a simulation. Probably the most simple is, right? The most simple example would be the game The Sims. And imagine we were a sim inside of a Sims game. And our soul, our higher self, another version of ourselves is the one that is behind the screen playing the game. And if a civilization like us, which I mean, The Sims came out over 20 years ago, right? I was in high school when The Sims came out. So if 20 years ago, with where we were at with technology, they were able to create a game, which is a full blown simulation of life, who's to say that there is not some advanced civilization, species, ourselves, advanced version of ourselves, who is able to create a similar type of game simulation, etc. So let's talk a little bit about that. We are the Sims and we play Sims. Yeah. So this comes back to, I've talked about it a lot in my Earthshift series. I've talked about it many times, comes back to the holographic universe theory. So the concept of the holographic universe, there's kind of two versions that I see people describe. A lot of people are describing it in what we think a hologram is, but that's not actually what a hologram is. So first I'll talk about that. Some people believe that, a hologram is like a false projection of something, that there's some type of technology or some type of something that projects an image and that image is so realistic that it completely mimics real life. But if we really get into the definition of what the holographic universe is actually about, and if you guys want to read the book Holographic Universe by Michael Talbot, he does an excellent breakdown of this. And so it's not actually a projection the way that we're seeing it. It's actually what's happening within that projection is what makes it a hologram. So the concept of a hologram is that every part has the whole within it. So let's say, for example, there was that Tupac hologram, right? They did it at like Coachella or something like 8 years ago, something like that. And so it was a hologram of Tupac and it looked just like him and performed and was all realistic. But what makes it a hologram is not that it is an image that is being projected, it's actually how it's made. So within that image is tiny little, let's call it pixels. They're probably not actually pixels, but let's call it like little pixels because that's what we're very familiar with. So imagine the whole image, each pixel has the entire image inside of it. So if you were to cut that hologram of Tupac in half, it would not be split into two parts. It would then change into two Tupacs. You cut them in again, it would become 4 Tupacs, fully intact versus split in half. It was 2012. Damn, we're getting old, huh? 8 years ago. More like 13 years ago. Wow. Okay. I'm traumatized, but thank you. Okay, so that's actually what makes it a hologram. And so the thing that this hologram idea, holographic universe idea, it really goes back to like the esoteric metaphysical teachings of as above, so below, and the microcosm, macrocosm concept of things. So if each little pixel has the entire photo within the pixel, that's also what's happening everywhere in our reality. It's okay. You don't have to apologize. I just didn't realize 13 years has gone so fast. Um, so does the human avatar emotions not matter or get to know what's going on? Seems shady. Okay. Seems shady. Okay. If you say so. Now, the question is, right, is I think this is what comes up when we talk about the simulation. So let's address it right away. Is the simulation idea, for some reason, people think immediately go to this thought of, well, then nothing matters. Well, then if it's not real, who cares? And then if the emotions are not real, then why do people care? Why does this? And it immediately diminishes the importance of it. And if it is real to us, then it matters, right? But there's concept comes up in many different things. It comes up in Hinduism as well with the concept of Maya. And Maya, and I believe it's also in Buddhism, that our waking state is really just a dream, is really just an illusion. And that everything that we perceive as real is actually just a temporary state, almost as if you're in a dream. So this concept has been around for a long time. Now, where some people get into some of the simulation stuff is then it's kind of like, well, then who created it? Right? Now, there's some different theories. The Nick Bostrom in 2003, he kind of coined this simulation theory term and talks about that basically it was probably an advanced civilization. And is it beyond a civilization, though, when I ask that question? Is it just another version of us? Is our metaphysical state, is our soul state, is us on the other side, would that be considered a civilization? I don't know. I don't agree with that terminology, but I agree with the sentiment of it. Parallel universe is a different dimension, maybe. That's why it's catastrophic if we see ourselves. Interesting question. So, the parallel universe thing is also connected to the simulation, right? So, let's say all of these possibilities exist. We know that, right? All of the possibilities exist. So, of course, it's like a simulation in some way, right? Because if we have all of these possibilities, but we only perceive one, it's creating, and that comes back to then quantum physics and the observer effect, where every quantum particle, every little tiny particle has all possibilities within it. It lives in a state of probable outcomes. But until you observe it, does that probable outcome become a reality that you experience? Which then brings us to the idea that if this is like any of these things, does anything exist before we engage with it or before we view it? Which all is really sounding very much like a simulation. But a simulation is not a bad thing. A lot of people like really diminish to think like, well, then it means it doesn't matter or it's not important or none of this. And that diminishes people's suffering. That diminishes people's love and hate and struggles. But it doesn't if we are experiencing it. And simulations are extremely important. If we look at as above, so below, in our reality, how do we use simulations? Sometimes, yes, as a game, such as The Sims, but then we also use it for astronauts, right? Astronauts go into a flight simulator in order for them to learn what it would be like to be in space, and they have these simulators in many different fields that people go into these simulators and that's a way for them to learn, to experience, to know what to do in that setting. So that is kind of what's happening, right? Our souls, our higher self exists in this other realm, in a realm where there isn't war, there isn't suffering, there isn't pain, there isn't betrayals, there isn't all of these things on the other side. So, how could they know themselves in this way? This comes back to the same concept of like the journey of souls stuff. This comes to the concept of choosing your life and choosing your experiences and choosing how to you said Mario Kart taught you how to drive. Well, you know what? This makes sense actually, because I was always really bad. I'd always be like ending up like turned around and it'd be like wrong way, wrong way, wrong way. So maybe I also learned how to drive from Mario Kart. So simulations are also used for testing before it goes into production. Test and learn phase. Yes. You said you got high a few weeks ago and theorized that all entertainment universes are just fractals of the simulation. All universes exist in reality to themselves, but to us, they're just entertainment. Beautiful. And like, also, like, yeah, it's like when we're creating entertainment, we are creating simulations within our reality. So who's to say that there's not a version of ourselves that is creating this reality? And I totally agree. Like, there's like sometimes like I'll see like this one song, this Sia song called Breathe Me, which was the season finale of 6 Feet Under. I mean, when that series finale of 6 Feet Under happened, and what was her name? Claire in the show? Claire is like driving away in the hearse, away from the family and all of that stuff. Everybody's like dead and it's going through all the deaths. And then they play that Sia song. Oh, that was so good. And then like, so I listened to it recently and I just had this kind of like weird, like beautiful knowingness feeling of like, oh my God, there's going to be a time when we are all not here on this earth, or maybe this like reality as we know it no longer exists. And then we're gonna like think back and be like, whoa, can you believe that all these actors and writers and producers and location people and sets and all of these things came together, musicians, artists, creatives, location people, assistants, and then millions and millions of people watching. We all came together to experience this show about death. And it was just, like, so moving and changed everything and was, like, so big for TV at the time, and it was, like, one of the first shows at that time that really, like, went into that type of development with, like with death, looking at death through this new lens and this family dynamic and stuff, and it was just so beautiful, and I'm like, "Damn, there's gonna be, like, a time when we are, like, on the other side and be like, 'Wow, do you remember when we did that?'" Like, as people on Earth, that we created that TV show that was so badass. But who's to say that there's not a part of ourselves that are already doing that with us? So, like, me as a person looking at that, like, wow, look at this entertainment reality that we created with this whole family and what they experienced and what they did and all that they went through. And we have that experience of this as above, so below, this holographic universe. So the holographic principle, let me come back to that. The holographic principle is it's a pattern. So the way that the universe is a pattern of like Earth, and then our body is like the same pattern of what's happening on Earth. And then within that, the cell. So it's like each cell has the entire universe in it. Or like, I mean, I always bring up that quote from literature from, is it Robert Frost? That says, oh, no, no, no. William Blake? Please don't quote me. I know, I bet you Whitney knows it. Um, where it says the entire universe or the entire world in a grain of sand. That everything that exists in the world or everything that exists in the universe exists within one grain of sand. And so we have this same concept that is happening, this pattern that is happening. So if we're creating The Sims as a game, and we're creating TV shows and movies, and we're simulating our own experiences into something. Who's to say that there's not another version of ourselves, another version of something that is doing the same thing with us? Now, like I said, some of these theories, when they've actually been coined, they say civilization. I feel like civilization is from our parameters. I believe it's beyond the concept of a civilization because I believe a lot of this is living in a hive. A lot of this is living in a collective. So the need for a civilization. Yes, Blake, William Blake. Woo. You're right. It's like the never ending story. Yes, another favorite of mine, where it's like the story is going on, but then he has his story observing it, and his observing of the story is impacting it. Our dreams are stored in the same place as past memories. So a simulation or dreams are as real. Yeah, exactly. Like that's like such a great point as well. So like the past and the future only exist within our mind. The only thing that actually exists is the present. Isn't it amazing how Hermetic philosophy, the ancient roots of spirituality, matches up with synchronicity of quantum science? It's incredible. I know, isn't it crazy? Like all of the stuff that's like in the Kabbalion is actually like becoming like quantum theory. Okay, so we have this observer effect, right? Where all these different possibilities exist. Everything exists within probability, but not until we observe it does it happen, which also mirrors a video game, right? So, like, you could have a video game, but if there's no one playing it, is the video game going? And so, okay. So then there's like the concepts of like then it starts to get into more like some of the theories go more towards consciousness, where the consciousness is the CPU. Consciousness is like the power for the system. So this system, what would it do without the consciousness to direct these probable what we call quantum particles? Then we go a step further, right? We get to more of the matrix type of stuff where is it just code? Is as what we're seeing organic material. We're seeing these quantum particles as organic material. But what if it is just code? It is just pixels, what we would call pixels. Like, you know how they say that like everything is like the binary code is zeros and ones? Like, who's to say that these quantum particles, that these cells, that all of these things are not just code? But this doesn't diminish the importance of what is happening. It doesn't mean that this is not important. It doesn't mean that this is not real to us right now. And then this comes back to the Hermetic principles, like Ash said just now. So, like in the Kabbalion, it talks about how all is mind. Everything that exists is mind. There is nothing aside from mind. And like mind is not the brain. Mind is beyond the brain, outside of the brain. Mind is in everything. Mind is everywhere. And so if all is mind, then there's kind of like this paradox, which is in the Hermetic principles, which talks about, well, how can we know that something is not real and still experience it as real? And this is where mastery comes. Like, and that comes with everything, right? So, like, if we know that everything is going in the law of rhythm, where it's going to be the pendulum swinging back and forth, how do you not get swung back and forth? It's mastery. Emotional stuff, all of these things, all the paradoxes of everything. Everything's going too left, too right, too red, too blue, too black, too white, too this, too that. Everything becoming all of these things. When you are not disrupted by those things, that's because then you're operating in a place of personal mastery. It doesn't matter if it's mastery to others. It's you being on those waves back and forth and being able to be stable and understand that both things exist. And this also comes into like what they talk about in Conversations with God, which is the divine dichotomy, that everything is a paradoxal state. So all truths are half truths because it's like, of course, this is real. This is a real experience that we're really having. And in order to actually get what we need out of this experience, we do have to treat it as real. But then we also have to have the mastery to know that it actually is not real. But in order for us to get what we need out of it, we need to treat it as real. You you struggle to not be a slave to the mind because you're actually free. Well, what's interesting, being a slave to the mind, it's almost like what you're saying is maybe some of those things are thoughts, right? Is it the mind as a whole, or is it thoughts that you're being feeling a slave to, is what you're saying? So is it that there's certain thoughts, but let's say, is this a simulation? Is the mind a very powerful program that is the CPU of this game, this simulation that we're in? So are these just programs? So any program can be reprogrammed, which is what Joe Dispenza talks about all the time. And many other people, Marissa Peer, I always talk about how like Joe Dispenza talks about it in the more like masculine scientific way. And Marissa Peer says the exact same things in a much more nurturing, feminine, and more like gentle, massaging it way. But both of them are saying the same exact things in different words. So we can, if you feel at any point that like you're not in control of your mind or you feel like you're a slave to your mind, then it really just means that the mind is fine. The mind is already creating the reality. It just needs to have its programs a little bit rewired, a little bit reshifted. And you could do that through some of the more intense type of stuff like Joe Dispenza does, or you could do it in a super light and gentle way, the way Marissa Peer talks about it, and follow her work. You said at least I think for me, I think I was able to understand this is more because of psychedelics, because medicine helped you to observe more than just the individual perspective and go beyond the macro quantum. And to see it all. Because we and agree to reality, like from the book The Voice of Knowledge. I've never read The Voice of Knowledge. I think I've mentioned this before, but an eccentric genius in my neighborhood has a PhD in quantum, and he says that our brains are just a receiver for some higher transmitter. I believe that that could be a version of what's going on as well. So there probably is a higher transmitter, which is what that in like the metaphysics, what are we calling that? In the spiritual, what are we talking about is sorry, I got distracted by this comment. I don't usually get distracted, but Daisy's mom, what are you talking about here? Joe Dispenza has been taken over by the dark side. Don't use him. Daisy's mom. Uh You said you're going to someone else says they're going to a Joe Dispenza retreat at the end of the month. Super excited. Yeah, I would not worry about Joe Dispenza being taken over by the dark side. There is no such thing as the dark side. There is no such thing. And Kimberly Sherry has said that as well as other high vibe people. Well, I don't know who the fuck Kimberly Sherry is. No, I don't care. I don't care who Kimberly Sherry is. Who cares what some person said? Like really when we go beyond I know someone's going to send it to this Kimberly Sherry video. Me out of context saying, "I don't give a fuck who she is." Okay? Tell Kimberly Sherry I said no. No, I don't know who that is. I don't know who that is. Okay. Enough is enough. Let Kimberly Sherry live in her own reality. Can you see energy? He has dark energy. No. Listen, all of these people who say that they see the energy and that are getting messages and then psychics, channels, this, that, this is going through their filter. Every single thing goes through their filter. All truths are half truths. When you look at the Hermetic principles, if somebody is saying that this is the infinite truth of all and that there is nothing beyond it, it means that they only have half of the information. And even if there was some dark side and all of that, everything is working towards the one whole, right? So, like, look at this. So, basically, let's use the example of this above, so below theory. We have every single thing is operating in duality because that's what this universe is created on. And we see that down to the cellular level, right? Because we have our cells have a positive and a negative charge. And so even our cells are not able to be alive and exist without the positive and negative charge. So if we want to eliminate the dark, eliminate the negative, eliminate, which is actually the feminine energy, um, the feminine energy is what is the dark side of the yin and yang, the the negative side of the cell. Also, like say in Hinduism, they have like Shiva is everything, but it can't take form without the Shakti. The Shakti would be considered like the negative side, which then creates form. So we cannot have form created without the other side of it. So you said we have to heal our dark side. Or maybe is it heal or is it that we have to see it and acknowledge it and accept it and learn to love it and not try to banish it? If you believe it's half of the information because past, present, future is happening all at once. I don't know what you mean by that statement. Watch now, Kimberly is going to make an MGK comeback video. I don't know who that is. What does Bashar say? I don't know what Bashar says. Isn't that Kabbalah? Kabbalah is influenced by the Hermetic principles. So the Hermetic principles are like precursors to Kabbalah. Yeah, the integration of it. You said, is that like what Bashar says? Oh, yeah, I'm not sure. Can you not have pure light on a quantum atomic level and the goal to be the only light force you chase a binary fantasy, better to balance and to accept both light and dark? Yeah. So there is only one. There is only the whole. But the whole, like a cell, is combined of the positive and the negative charge. And in order for the cell to do what it does, it needs both. In order for humanity to continue to create, it needs both. It needs feminine and masculine. In order for, like I said, for Shiva, it needs to have the Shakti. It needs to have the feminine energy, the what would be considered the negative force, but negative does not mean bad. Negative is just opposite. If you have two sides of a battery, is one good and one bad? Oh, I mean, this is the question that everybody always asks. That this is like immediately what everybody comes to whenever I talk about like there not being darkness. So we'll just address it. What do you think about child sacrifice and torture and satanic cults? Is that dark or not? Okay. So my experience with which was on ayahuasca, is there's two reasons why evil happens. There's two reasons for darkness. And one, so if somebody were to do something like that, if someone to harm a child, that person is still a fractal of God. It still came from source. God still created it. It's still part of the universe. It's still made of the same things that all of us are made of. And, in a very simple term, it is still a child of God. It is still a tiny piece of God. However, that person has become so lost, so wounded, so broken, so confused, so far from who they are. Like, we all have this divine spark of God within us, but they have become so wounded and so far from it that they can't even remember that they are actually lost from who they are. And now they are operating from a wounded place. Nobody is doing that. Like, I mean, obviously on the base level, people would say that somebody is doing that for pleasure. They're doing it because they're so severely damaged and wounded. What made them so lost? I mean, if you talk to people who do this stuff, they were usually abused themselves, damaged themselves, destroyed completely, their self-worth completely destroyed. This is not to say that those things are okay. But I'm going to say it every week on the Tuesday Night Live. If you really want to be some light worker, if you really want to be a good Christian, if you want to be these things, you need to be able to love that person who is so wounded that they forgot. And again, I'll say it again, and then we'll get back to simulation thing. Also, like, the most simple the way to understand it is the book, The Little Soul in the Sun by Neil Donald Walsh. It's the children's version of Conversations with God. And it basically says, in God, in light, every single fractal of God is pure light, is pure love, is pure God. But how can you see one candle when there's billions of candles? You just see the whole sun. You can't see the one candle. So then if one part of the light wants to experience itself, how can it see who it is? There's so much light that it doesn't know where you start, where I end, where this is that. We're all just in one. So in order for that fractal of God to experience itself, it must have some shadow to obscure, so that then it's like, oh, well, now I can see the edges of myself. Now I can actually see who is me and who is you. But I need this shadow in order to experience that. So in that book, the kid which is the little soul, wants to experience the part of the light, which is itself, it is the part of light that is forgiveness. So then it says, well, how can I forgive? How can I experience forgiveness if there's nothing to forgive? So then another part of light comes forward and says, I'll help you, but I have to make myself so dense. I have to make myself so far from who I am. I have to make myself so far from God, from light, from love, in order to give you something to forgive so that you can know yourself. And then what it says in that book is that before they incarnate onto earth to have this experience, the soul that is going to become dense, become dark, become heavy for that experience to give the other one the lesson is saying, but please don't forget me. Don't forget who I am now. Don't forget that I am light. Don't forget that I'm also a part of God, that I'm also a part of love. Because if you forget who I am, I've already made myself so dense and dark. I'll also forget who I am, and then we'll be lost. And then someone else will have to come to remind us of who we are so that then we can merge back. The book is called The Little Soul in the Sun, and it's a children's book by Neil Donald Walsh. So the two reasons why people do the unspeakable, they're lost. They've become so lost away from the fact that they are God. And then the other side is that some souls are advanced enough or willing enough to risk their own ascension, their own journey for others to experience and to know themselves. You said, okay, that's what you're saying. Joe Dispenza has become dense and dark. He wasn't always that way. I don't know. I think it's bullshit what you're saying. But I mean, I know a lot of people in this space. And also, like, I have never met Joe Dispenza, but I know people who know Joe Dispenza. And a lot of people, everybody talks like very, very, very highly of him behind closed doors. Like he has done very, very, very kind stuff for people when nobody's looking, which is actually very rare in this space. You know, a lot of these people when nobody's looking are womanizers, just telling you, right? So like, I don't believe that Joe Dispenza is, I think people are seeing their own stuff and everything is a reflection. So if somebody is seeing like there's dark energy around him, what is going on inside of that person that they're tuning into that, you know? Yes, Meg, our shadows are where our most potent gifts are. I agree. You said that's a troll who said it about Joe. No, I don't think that they're trolling. I think that they're genuinely listening to information from people and that they're just getting another perspective. Do you know of bad synchronicity, dark synchronicity like schizophrenia? Okay, so this is really interesting. When I was in Sedona, I saw Bashar. I saw Bashar as Bashar, and then I saw him again as Daryl Anka. And, a lot of the stuff he talked about was kind of, stuff that I was already aware of, or some of it that I didn't resonate with. But one of the things that he said that really stuck out to me is exactly what you're talking about, which is negative synchronicity. And he didn't get into it. And that was like the thing I left that thing being like, damn, I wish he would have talked about that because actually, very similar to what you're saying, it's been in my mind ever since. And I've seen that happen to someone before. That happened to someone very close to me that they fell into like negative synchronicity and they became schizophrenia. And so obviously, we have this. So this goes back to the simulation theory, right? So the simulation, another supporting evidence is manifestation and co-creation with the universe and synchronicity and the law of attraction. So because we're able to manipulate the reality using our consciousness, using our will, using our emotions, using our unconscious thoughts and beliefs, this further supports that this is some type of manifestation, that there is some type of simulation, because we are able to manifest the reality and co-create with the reality. So we know that synchronicity, manifestation, law of attraction, all of that stuff oftentimes works in the positive, or at least we often hear about it in the positive. Someone had asked And he just touched on it for like 1 second. And what he said has stuck out to me because I've been thinking about it, is it becomes a downward spiral. So when we have like synchronicity and co-creation, it's like the spiral goes upward, right? Like, oh, 333. Oh, the thing that I wanted is now here. The manifestation that I wanted is now here. And we start to go up the spiral. But then sometimes we can have negative synchronicities that are a downward spiral and can lead, yeah, exactly, like you're saying, like a reverse Fibonacci sequence. And the fact also with the simulation theory, the fact that everything is like operating in the Fibonacci sequence and in a spiral only goes to show that this is probably some type of divine creation that we're in. So could it be like a Christian reading upward spiral, but reverse for the thrill, but also mental health? I don't know what that means. I don't know what the um, reading upward spiral means. An upside down matrix. Some people talk about a reversed matrix. I don't know if I believe that there's a reversed matrix, or maybe there is and we don't access it. I don't know. I've heard different theories about that. I don't know how much they resonate. But, and yeah, synchronicities are little winks from God, little winks from the universe, and all of these things. But sometimes I did see this happen to someone before. The synchronicities, as they started to go into psychosis, became so extreme. And like, he'd be like, he'd talk about a tiger and then he'd go outside and there'd be a toy of a tiger outside of his place. And then the next thing and the next, and it was so extreme, like to the point that other people were seeing it. It wasn't like he was only seeing these synchronicities. I was seeing them. He would say something and it would instantly come to true. Like he was here at my place and he's like, I want to see a UFO tonight. And then uh we didn't see a UFO, but a helicopter came so low close to my window that everything was shaking in my apartment. Like it was like instant crazy manifestation, but like really rippling out into the reality that everybody could see. And it was like it was like magician, crazy magician shit. However, it descended into psychosis. And the messages became so convoluted of what actually was the universe communicating with him. What was he actually communicating with the universe? So I recorded a podcast today with my best friend, Chelsea. It's going to come out on Thursday, Ultra Minds with JK Ultra on Thursdays on YouTube at 11 a.m. And she actually is a shaman. And she talks about how in shamanism, one of the things that they talk about is that we have these kind of like facets within our like field. And you'll see when you watch the podcast, but like that we have these like facets that we see through, that this is how we peer out into the world and see all of our perception in. However, when she says when people start to go into psychosis or schizophrenia, that facet becomes too wide open and they're seeing far too much perception. I saw someone comment here about shamanism. Let me see. Um, let's see. You said everything is a creation of our own mind. That's true. But then we also have the collective mind, which is the balance between both. So sometimes we're creating, but also if we're not actively creating, our thoughts, emotions, inward, unconscious stuff is creating. But then also, if we're not actively creating, we are also more at the whim of the co-creation of the whole. And it can become the unconscious thoughts of the whole, or even the active thoughts of the whole, meaning the whole of like the human race. You said you don't demonize Joe Dispenza, but you have seen TikToks about having demon visuals with his meditations. Okay, so that's a thing too. Another thing that came up in the podcast that's going to come out on Thursday is, you know, right before I had my crazy shadow work journey, I had done a meditation, not from Joe Dispenza. I had a creepy, demonic experience. And that was the precursor to something within me that really needed addressing. And it wasn't that this is like a demon is an outside force. A lot of times, demons are actually wounded parts of our inner child or wounded parts of our inner teen or a wounded part of ourself that is desperately trying to be seen, to get attention, and is acting out like what happens many times with anyone who is very wounded, will sometimes act out for attention. So, if someone was seeing demons in their meditations, it very much is showing that, like, should they be blaming the person who's saying the words of a meditation, or do they need to look at something within themselves? And part of what they're refusing to look at is the self. And that's what needs the attention. Is the self is what's begging for the attention. When you start having the visuals of the demons, that is something within you. Same thing with like a lot of the sleep paralysis stuff. Not to say that there's nothing else out there, that there's not any entities, but a lot of times these sleep paralysis demons that people experience are actually stuff that is happening within the self that is being reflected back. A lot of times when people experience it, they're in extreme depression, they're in a very dark place, they're sometimes experiencing extreme addiction. Okay. Uh, they'd also say schizophrenia and shamanism swim in the same waters, but schizophrenia has drowned where shamans swim. Oh, that's beautiful. Okay. Have you seen anything of what Dr. Michael P. Masters has said? No, I don't know who that is, unfortunately. Last night was feeling a little shitty and then saw 1111 and instantly felt a higher frequency. Yeah, this is the co-creation, the messages from yourself. Why is the old hag seen by so many? Oh, I have a great answer for that, actually. Um, Whitney actually helped me to get the answer to that, who's here in the live chat. So Whitney wanted to know under hypnosis, what is the old hag? And so you said, what is the old hag? So the old hag is sometimes a sleep paralysis demon, which sometimes people experience. And what's weird is like people experience this, but then later find out thousands and thousands of people have experienced the exact same entity, which is what makes you believe, is this not part of the self? Is this something part of the collective? And it's basically an old creepy woman who oftentimes will sit on a person's chest and suck their energy while they're stuck in sleep paralysis. And you've probably seen it depicted in like different horror movies and stuff. It's always been around. And so you said, is there going to be a recording? So the recording will be up on YouTube. I'm streaming also on YouTube at the same time. So anyone on TikTok that wants to rewatch later or go back or share this information with someone, come onto YouTube and it'll be the most recent video on my Tuesday Night Live playlist. So this old hag, when we asked about it, it was saying basically that the old hag is almost like a gatekeeper, that she is actually almost like a test between going into another realm, another dimension. And she is almost like someone that is at like the doorway of another dimension. So people who have psychic abilities, people who are more gifted naturally to open the third eye, to open their clairs, will oftentimes experience something like the old hag, because it's actually like a test that they need to overcome. Because one, she's scary as shit. And two, she feeds on your energy. And is it really feeding on your energy? Maybe. Who knows, right? But it feels like she's feeding and sucking out your air. And so it's actually this threshold, this gatekeeper, who people who are more inclined to go into those other realms, to walk into those other dimensions, to slip into those other places, especially in the dream state. The old hag is the test that comes onto them and says, like, are you going to be able to overcome your fear? Are you going to be able to protect your energy? Or are you going to give in to fear and not be able to protect your energy? Then you're not going to basically pass to the next level to go into that thing. So even though it's very scary, it's almost like uh, a blessing to go through that than to just end up in this other realm and not know how to overcome fear or not know how to preserve your energy or help yourself. And so there's a lot of times then people will shut down their psychic abilities after that happens. So someone might be a kid and wake up, that have that experience, or young adult or teen or something, and have that experience, and then they turn themselves off after that. Then they're like, whoa, I'm closing the psychic channel off. I'm done. And that was the test of like, that is not for them. Why would real-time trigger trauma, sleep paralysis happen to you during times of crisis? Yeah, well, it's slipping into these other realms, right? And you guys are going to love the podcast on Thursday because we talk about the lower realm, the middle realm, and the upper realm. We talk about how to safely travel through the realms. We talk about, because basically that's what's happening in shamanism. We're going into the dream state. This is another realm. So sometimes if you're going into those other realms, but your vibration is messed up because of something that's happening in your real life, you're going through a breakup, you're going through losing your job, you're going through financial issues, you're going through somebody sick, through a death, through an illness, through other traumas, your vibrational state is in a certain place and you start to slip into this realm. So sometimes it's actually almost like a little bit of a protector from you going into those realms, and you can like stop or, jolt yourself out when there's sometimes entities there. You said you've had that experience, scared the hell out of you, but you kept going. Yeah. And that's the thing. Like, a lot of people who have psychic gifts have experienced it. You have dreams that you're having sleep paralysis, but it's happening in a dream, if that makes sense. Oh, that's interesting. I have something that happens to me in dreams a lot, which is I start to fall asleep in the dream. So, like, I'll start to faint or fall asleep in a dream. Like, I'll be fine, and then all of a sudden, like, I'll feel like I can't keep my eyes open in the dream, and I feel like I'm gonna faint or fall asleep, and as I start to faint, my eyes open in real life, and it's so weird. Like, I start to, like, shut down in the dream, and as I'm trying to open my eyes in the dream, I open my eyes in real life. Okay, you love Chelsea's meditation at the Illuminate event, and that's how she explained those realms. Yeah, that was so beautiful. Like, that was so amazing, that Illuminate event. I mean, I do wanna do that again. I just have been really busy. Okay, the whole old hag archetype is a shadow side of the feminine sage wise woman versus the light side of the sage archetype, which would be the grandmother, grandmother. Ooh, fairy godmother. That's beautiful. Never heard of that. Mhm. Okay. You've had sleep paralysis for over 15 years. Now, the other reason sometimes people have sleep paralysis is not because of stuff going on in their life. It's because they're doing stuff in the astral in other realms when they're sleeping, and the body is waking up before coming back. You've seen the podcast with Darius J. Wright that he says sleep paralysis is a doorway to lucid dreams and OBEs. Yeah, I do agree that that's possible. I want to interview Darius. I haven't really watched that much of his stuff, but everything that I've watched of Darius, I'm like blown away by. I really, really like him. So I think I'm gonna reach out to him to be on the podcast too. Okay, let's get back to some of the simulation stuff. So the holographic universe, the concept, so that some people might not be real, they might be parts of the simulation. Also, the fractal reality concept, which is kind of like a holographic universe concept that like there's fractals of reality and that they're all like within the microcosm, macrocosm of things. Let's see. Also, there's like this concept in Gnosticism called the demiurge, and the demiurge is kind of like this being, this god, this creature, this thing that kind of like a lower level god, not big G god, little g god, who's the one who actually created this reality, who actually formed this physical state, this physical world that we live in. And we talked about, I think last week we talked about Lucifer, right? And Lucifer is almost like a demiurge type of thing as well, where like some people believe that he helped create Earth as an experiment to serve God so that God would be able to experience itself in a more expanded way. Okay, what else? Obviously, glitches in the matrix, right? Glitches in the simulation. This is happening more and more. And is this happening because people are becoming more aware of things, become operating at a higher level of consciousness? So if consciousness is the CPU and people are operating at a higher CPU, we look at the as above, so below, microcosm, macrocosm concept. So look at our analog world that has paralleled what's happening to us in the metaphysical as well. So I was born in the 80s. So, you know, there was I literally had a record player in my house, okay? So it was like record players, cassette tapes. I mean, there was 8 tracks inside there, right? So like, uh, but cassette tapes, CDs, MP3s, MP3 players, and then now streaming, all of that exists everywhere. So we went to like, you had an actual physical record that had grooves carved into it, which is what played the music. Then we went to a little strip of whatever that stuff was made out of inside of the cassette tapes that would get all like wrapped up and like, yeah, like spin it back. Then the music would be on there. Then the CD, um, on the back that it was like, how was that like mirror thing have all the music on it? Then the MP3s, which was then just completely digital, but you needed a device, a player for it. I mean, you needed a player for all of them, right? So you needed the player for the record player, you needed the player, the Walkman or the boombox for the cassette. Then you needed like a CD player. Then you needed an MP3 player. And then we went to this point where you don't need the like I mean, we still use like our computer, but it's like the same device does everything. The same device communicates. The same device is a calculator, is the internet, is a TV, is a microphone, is an editing software, is social media, plays music, plays this. All of it is like accessible. So if you watched the last episode 3 of Ultraminds with Cara Elizabeth, who created the Animal Apothecary deck, she's creating her next deck, which is called Body Tech. And it's about that the body is the ultimate technology. And again, this is the simulation, the as above, so below, the microcosm, macrocosm, the holographic model of the universe, which is that pattern. The holographic model of the universe is just that pattern of microcosm, macrocosm. So if we're looking at, and what she says in the podcast that I love is that the outer world is a reflection. So the technology is a reflection of what's happening within. So the fact that we're seeing technology advance in this way to now we're at AI, where AI can literally just create a song on like the Donna app. You can just create AI music, a whole freaking song in 30 seconds. Just put a couple words in and it instantly materializes. These advancements are mirroring the upgrades that are happening within us, within our consciousness. And this is then what's happening within the simulation, right? So is this part of the reason why we're having more glitches in the matrix? Because our outer world is reflecting our inner state. You said Jason Paget, who became a savant, explains quantum holography. Okay. Entities and gods contacting us through the universe as the hologram, seeing gods in the hologram. Okay. Well, sometimes like even we're on MPZ version of ourself and the version of ourself in the past or future imagined versions of ourself, they're MPC to us now. Okay. So, I have a little bit of strong feelings about the MPC topic because I do believe in it. You said AI is a reflection of our higher self. I do believe that. Now, under hypnosis, when Sarah Bruxman put me under hypnosis, it talked about how we're using NPC in a derogatory way and that it's kind of not beneficial to the concept because we're using it in a way that is kind of like meaning like we're on like autopilot mode. But it's so being on autopilot as a soul, as an individual, as a fractal of God, having an individual experience is so far from what the concept actually is, which is it's more similar to synchronicities. Like a synchronicity is closer to what an NPC backdrop person is. How, oh, I need some guidance from the universe. Oh, it says 1111. Or, oh, I was just talking about that and then it popped up. And so the NPC concept is closer to that, what it really is happening in the universe. An NPC non-player character is just this thing within the game. But like if you look at that too, that is just a programmed thing that exists within the game. the same way the trees in the game exist, the same way that the ground in the game exists, that the fake air in the game exists. So, like, it's more along those lines than being on autopilot. Oh, thank you. Okay. You have a narcissistic boyfriend is participating in gang stalking. Do you think he's an NPC? No, I don't. Um, I don't I don't think that we're interacting with the NPC backdrop people in that way, to be honest with you. I think that they are very, very, very much in the background. Now, there is this other kind of concept, which is like people were saying that you can kind of be an NPC version of yourself, but that is even further a different concept. So, okay, let's do the timeline thing, which I've given this example many times, but okay. If you, every single day, you are making choices, every single day you are making choices, and oh, hold on, I have to verify myself. Wow, I got the CAPTCHA on the first try, guys. So, yeah, someone is saying being narcissistic a lot of the time is because of childhood trauma and past lives. Exactly. That's the thing. Being narcissistic doesn't mean that you don't have a soul. It just means that that was the coping mechanism for trauma. The same way being a people pleaser is a coping mechanism for trauma. And they're both coming from the same wound, but those traumas are playing out in different ways with each other, but they're actually on the same wavelength, which is why the people pleaser empath always ends up with the narcissist until they heal and work on that, and then end up on a new wavelength where then they bring a new person into their life who is on that same healed wavelength, who might have had the same wounds as them, but has healed those wounds as well. But let's talk about the timeline thing, go back to that for a thing. So basically, every single day, every single decision is shaping the reality. So a small decision versus a big decision. So, like, let's say I was like, "You know what? I don't feel like doing the Tuesday Night Live today. I'm not gonna do it." And then that could have triggered something, like, not something significant, but maybe something for someone significant. Maybe someone was like, "Oh, Jen didn't do her Tuesday Night Live tonight. I guess I'll go for a walk instead." And then they go out on that walk, and then they have an idea on that walk, and then that idea ends up becoming a piece of art that they end up creating. So there is like little things, but that's not going to have a global impact. That will impact me, but then it will also impact potentially someone else, some of our choices. But every single day, we're making a choice every single day, every single moment of what we want to live and experience. And the now, which is the only thing that exists because the present, I mean, the present is the only thing that exists because the past exists in our mind and the future exists in our mind. So those don't exist in the physical reality. The only thing that exists in the physical reality is the now. And the now is constantly being reprinted every night, every moment. And then basically, now, let's say you make a decision that is greatly impacting another person. Let's say you make a decision that you want to live on your highest timeline. And I'm not going to do this anymore. I'm not going to do this anymore. I'm going to start living my life this way. I'm going to move. I'm going to this. I'm going to that. I'm going to follow my dreams. I'm going to quit this job and do this. I'm going to leave this relationship and do this. I'm going to start this job and do this. I'm going to do this. Those can trigger a new timeline that is more impactful to others, that does impact others. But then some of those other people might not want to go on to the highest timeline that you're following, and they want to continue on their timeline. So what will happen is a lot of times when you make a decision in life that is very big, you might start to drift away from people who are important to you. You might start to drift away from an old friend, an ex, an old job, people from an old job, people from your old town, people from an old school. When you make a old, let's say you used to do drugs and then now you don't do drugs anymore, you drift away from those people who continue on that timeline. But you don't disappear out of that person's timeline because all the timelines are intersected and everything is living in probability. So what happens is almost an NPC version of yourself. So it's not that you're an NPC, but almost an NPC version of yourself continues to exist in that person's reality. So let's say, for example, You guys know what happened to some degree. I talked about it on my Substack, what happened with my ex-boyfriend. Like, he, went into psychosis. He had done drugs, went into psychosis, and then, became homeless, spiraled, all of this stuff. I, at that time, got deeper into my practices, became freaking JK Ultra, and ended up now doing this work that I'm doing. And so I took a timeline and he took a timeline. These are obviously timelines that are not aligned with each other anymore. So we drift far apart from each other, pretty much to never speak again. And now, what if in his reality, I'm like this horrible person who did this thing to him, but in my reality, he did all this stuff to me? Because this is what I need him to be in order for my lessons, in order to motivate me, in order to shift me, in order for me to make decisions to certain things I want to learn and certain things I want to heal to move forward. But what if he doesn't see the story in the same way, that there's an NPC version of me that exists in his reality that is like this, uh, whatever, terrible bitch that stole his idea, and, I'm doing something completely different in his world. So this is what's happening at the same time. And this person, Zach, is, I don't know, wigging out. Like, he's really desperate for attention. Zach, it's okay. We see you. You're all right. We'll give you a little bit of attention because you know what? Everybody needs a little, okay? Everybody needs a little. But you go on with yourself. We're wishing you the best, hun, okay? Bye-bye. So basically, oh, you want me to continue? It's interesting. Thank you. Thank you. I'm glad we're on the same page. So basically, we go into these two different timelines where almost an NPC version of yourself will exist in this person, because it's not like you're going to disappear out of this person's reality. So this kind of comes back to maybe like the earth shift theory, the earth splitting, the pole shift, the people living on one timeline versus people living on another timeline. And so splitting on these two timelines, do the other people just disappear? No, a different version of you exists in that timeline. A version of you that doesn't exist in your reality, because your main player character is playing on highest timeline level, and their main player character is maybe playing on like a lower timeline for themselves. But you're still a character in their game, but you might not be a main character anymore. So if someone is like actively a part of your life, then probably it's not an NPC situation at all. Someone who once was a part of your life, who now is so far, and it's like they exist as this different thing. Like, what if you had this great relationship with someone and now this person is just, I mean, like one of my favorite songs, the Gautier song, so just somebody that I used to know. That's them like existing in another reality now. So then we come back to this simulation theory where it's like, in the simulator, in the game, in the simulation, all the possibilities exist. In quantum physics, all of the particles are living in probability of anything. And once it is observed, that's what's materialized. That's what exists. So, and also, it is similar to a dream, because we were talking about dreams. It is similar to a dream because the dream is materializing, as you go in the dream. And anyone who like practices lucid dreaming or anything like that knows that it can be materialized as you go. So that is like a reflection of what is happening in the physical world. It's just it happens slower in the physical world. I think reality chooses how to evolve and can be influenced by our higher or lower selves. I agree. I do believe that there is a successful timeline of the universe that already exists and that we go into the past to experience it as a physical form. So like there's versions of ourself that would, if we were in linear time, be thousands of years in the future. Our higher self, our evolved self exists in a time. And then when we incarnate, we go into this simulation, which is like an old book, an old story, very similar to like what someone had said about the never ending story. Now, then we get into the kind of whole reincarnation thing, right? So if Earth is a simulation, the other side, everything that is talked about within Journey of Souls is a simulation outside of that simulation. So the other side, everything that is talked about in Journey of Souls and like where we go when we die and where our soul families are and where our loved ones are and where we decide who we're going to be and all the different lives that we've had and all of that is a simulation. And then Earth is a simulation within that simulation. It's like how there's a game and there's a game within a game. And then inside this game, there's the game The Sims, there's the game this, there's the game movies, there's the game school, the game of this thing. So it's like, I mean, it's like that Rick and Morty episode when the battery of their car dies. Oh my God. Yeah. Yelena, you just said the same exact thing at the same exact time. You're in a simulation inside a simulation from Rick and Morty. Yeah, where the battery on their ship dies. So in order to get the recharge for the battery, they have to go into the battery where it's a whole civilization that is then working to power the battery. And then within the battery, there's a scientist who starts to create a battery to power their system, not realizing they're just within the battery of another battery. You're tripping my brain out. Makes a lot of sense. I haven't seen that episode. You should watch it. I forget what it's called. It's a simulation, really a simulation. If you believe that to be real when perception creates reality. I don't know. Could you reword your question? So the other side is the next bigger Russian doll simulation. Yeah, it is like a Russian doll. It is until then, like this other thing, right? Then like the galactic stuff, right? Then where there's Arcturians and Pleiadians and all of this and blah, blah, blah. That's another level of the simulation, right? That's the simulation game outside of the simulation game, outside of the Earth game. Then we have Sims inside the game. And then inside Sims, they can play games. And it's like this whole pattern. Are we in a battery? We could be powering something. Are you seeing simulation levels like dimension levels? I think it goes beyond just dimensions because a dimension is within this sphere of Earth. We have many different dimensions within this. And like that's where it really comes back to the Vedic cosmology, which is with the Vedic cosmology, where it shows Earth planes, that there's many different planes within Earth, and that all these different things are existing within this one like bubble, but that there's other bubbles that exist as well that have other planes and things like that. So, but is it possible for us to understand like a mouse doesn't understand taxes? So that's a good point. Now, then we kind of come back to what we talked about in other lives, where basically, like an animal, we raise an animal's consciousness by interacting with it. So let's say you have a little dog. When you start to treat that little dog like, do you want to do this or do you want to do this? Do you want to go out or do you want to stay home? Do you want this food or do you want this? And you start to like treat them as like an individual who can like interact and make decisions and things like that, then it starts to raise their consciousness of like, huh, I have a decision. I have a preference. Well, I like the wet food instead of the dry food. I like, I like human food. I like this. I like to go to the bathroom here in front of this house. I don't like that other dog over there. Starts to become I am. And we start to raise this animal's consciousness, and then the animal starts to have a higher awareness. The same thing happens with us as the as above, so below. We interact with angels, spirit guides, aliens, Arcturians, Pleiadians, all of these things. It raises our consciousness to a more expanded level. So, yeah, a mouse just living the experience as a mouse can't understand stuff. But if you know anybody who has like a rat pet, you'd be like very surprised how like a rat can actually be very like aware. Not enough to do taxes. I mean, that's extreme, right? But the rat can kind of become aware of things and start to do things that you would think a rat is not able to do. Like, if you guys have ever seen this documentary about the guy who, like, has a friend that's a crocodile, he, like, saves a crocodile, and then he starts hanging out with it every day, and this crocodile, like, it basically says, like, "Oh, no, reptiles have no feelings." But obviously, when they're given love and feelings, they do, because you see it that this crocodile loves this dude. It's his best friend and wouldn't hurt him, wouldn't do a single thing to harm him. So, rats doing accounting is a capitalist dream. That's true. Um, Sims seems more innocent. Put down the voodoo doll and the Sim zapper and the wand. Sim seems innocent to us, right? But I mean, half the time we as kids would like make a pool and then put no ladder in the pool. So then the Sims is just like drowning in the pool because there's no ladder, right? So, that seems innocent to us because we don't see it as like valuable as a piece of life. Do you think any animals are aware that Donald Trump won the election? Isn't there that cat, right? Isn't there that cat that like can pick two different choices of things? And didn't he pick that he was like voting for Trump or whatever when they asked the cat who he was going to vote for? The only thing keeping you going right now is your dog, and they're such a blessing. Animals are such a blessing. Rats are super smart. I think, yeah, if you interact with any animal, it's going to become super smart. Sims are people too. Your dog must know because you've been crying for the last month straight. Oh, I'm sorry. But they're angels. They really are. Animals are angels, especially when we open to that, right? When we open that energy for them to be fully evolved in that way, they really are, and we allow them to ascend their consciousness the same way that sometimes interacting with higher dimensional beings, with a spirit guide, with the Akashic records, with meditation, with the quantum fields, with lucid dreaming, with out of body experiences, things like that, that those things can all um, make us more intelligent and make us more aware of our bigger purpose, just like the dog is becoming aware of its bigger purpose. You said spirituality is not political. Yeah, uh, it's not. Politics isn't even political, right? It's literally performative. It's another game within the game. It's like the Super Bowl or any other game. Even outside, birds are at bird feeders. They interact with you and they show their appreciation. Yeah, animals are such a blessing. It's true. Okay, guys, let me see if there's any information too. Obviously, deja vu, Mandela effect. If we have a VR set, if we have AI, if we have deep fakes that are as realistic as they are at our level, imagine what a higher level can create. What's going on with all the airplanes? I don't know, but I've been flying a bit lately. So I'm grateful for being safe on planes. Um, Okay, what else? The demiurge, we talked about NPCs, we talked about okay, so, like, yeah, that basically the digital code. Yeah, I think that we've gotten to through all the simulation stuff. Are we a deep fake? Exactly. Like, that's what I mean is, like, the more that we become ascending in our own consciousness, the CPU of the simulation runs harder, faster, bigger, badder, the same way. That's where I was going with the technology stuff, but I got off track. Was if we look at the computer that we had 20 years ago, a Dell desktop computer, and then now I have this M2 and I just saw the other day M4 is out of these new MacBook Pros, and we have these the processor, the CPU, the power, the memory is operating higher, 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 and that's a reflection of what's happening to us. Our consciousness is starting to operate higher, 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 and then if this simulation, if this reality, if this mind, if this matrix is run, the CPU is consciousness, then yeah, then the more we create new things, such as the vessel for AI, such as deep fakes, such as newer technology, more advanced technology, then who's to say that something didn't have the ability to create us? Can we talk about the connection between two souls? Is that real? I do believe that. Yeah, I absolutely believe that because then, like, there are more than one player in the game, right? Even though in the end, there's only one player, which is God, which is the universe, which is source, which is the one, which is the all. But the all, just like we talked about with the little soul and the sun, in order for the one to experience itself, it must take a tiny little fractal and have an individual experience. So we are God having an individual experience so that it can see one more vantage point of the whole perspective, so that it can know every part of itself. So it is possible that more than one fractal would then align with each other and want to be with each other as friends, romantically, in whatever way. So, absolutely, absolutely, there is two souls that will both be on the same timeline, on the same wavelength. And we're always meeting people on our same wavelength. And guys, and we're going to talk about it in the podcast on Thursday with Chelsea, because Chelsea's the one who did the shamanic healing on me during my shadow work journey, which really changed my life. Completely. I wouldn't say like it completely healed me overnight because I was not well for a couple months after that of the integration. But only after that deep shadow work was I able to really finally admit to myself what was going on with the wavelength. Why was I ending up with cheaters? Why was I ending up with all of these relationships that were betraying me, that were hurting me, like in different ways that people are hurt. I thankfully it's not like an abusive way, but it was in betrayal, it was in lying, it was in cheating, it was in sneakiness, it was in these things. And I was thinking like, oh, people are so messed up that they would do this. Who the fuck would do something like this? Who lies to the people they love? Who cheats on the people they love? And it's so far from who I saw myself as that I couldn't see that I was actually on the same wavelength as that person. But same thing, like I said before, with the narcissist and the people pleaser. The narcissist and the people pleaser are so different in the physical and in their actions, but their wound is the same. They both did not have their needs met as a child. And when the needs were not met as a child, one person decides, well, the way I get my needs met is by um, making people need me, making people want me, doing stuff for people, helping them, bending over backwards for them, because that's how then I'll be getting my needs met is by bending over backwards for everybody else's needs. And then the other side of the coin is, oh, I'll get my needs met by taking, by manipulating, by tricking, by any means necessary, no matter what. And these people are actually on the same wavelength, and then they're going to line up again. And then this is why people end up in these same relationships with other people in a different form. And then you finally get to like a point in your life where you're like, oh, well, how many times could I date the same person in a different form, in a different costume, in a different meat suit, in a different body? But it's the same thing, the same story, the same thing playing out again. And it's not until you come back to that wound and heal it and come back to that and really sit with it and reflect on it and take responsibility in a way, which sucks. It sucks to take responsibility for things that were done to us. And not to take the responsibility in a low form of like, well, I was cheated on because I guess I'm just not good enough. I guess I'm just not worthy of love. I guess I'm just an unlovable piece of shit that nobody will ever love or like or want. That's not taking responsibility for it. Taking responsibility is, wow, these wounds within me made me really feel that I could never have anything better than this, that I could never have something better than someone who's using me for their needs, because you're actually using them to get your needs met as well, but in a different way, in a self-sacrificing way. And then that's when you get to break off of that wavelength and find another person who then is, you're always going to find people on your same wavelength. So what you need to do is get on a different wavelength where then you might have someone who has that same wound as you, but has healed it, has taken the time to get over it, has reflected, has seen that it was something that was a reflection of how they felt about themselves, that it wasn't just the mercy of the world and the tortures of the world, but then they meet back at that wavelength. So then you might meet someone who is like you, but it's like the new version of you on a new timeline. And now, but energy doesn't lie. So that's the thing, is you could say and believe whatever you want, but if the energy is still resonating of that unworthiness, and like, I was very open throughout all of these Tuesday night lives over the last year of like everything that I went through between the ayahuasca experience, my shadow work journey, the self-hatred that I didn't even know that I had because it was so hidden from me. And my Leo self could not believe that that was the case because I thought I was great. I thought I was wonderful. But seeing all of these things then is brought me to a new wavelength to attract different type of people into my life. So that's the thing that like we're always going to meet at the same wavelength. And then the reality meets at the same wavelength too, right? Maybe one area of your life, you change the wavelength. So maybe your work, your art, your creativity comes in, but then maybe the love is not coming in. So then maybe you need to reflect on that of like, why is everything working my life in every area except for this one area? So then what is the wound around this area? And what do I need to go deeper into in that area? And then you meet the person that is you, and then you are looking in the mirror. Yeah, 100%. Dolores Cannon says, we are on this earth to learn how to manipulate energy. I agree with that too. You can bend reality with your words, but reality always snaps back. Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah, that's why it really does take like the deeper work. Mhm. That makes sense about the narcissistic and people pleaser being on the same energy level. Really curious about us creating reality. Can't grasp this over intelligent design sometimes. Okay, so by intelligent design, you mean the concept that this was created by something else. Like basically it's in between God and evolution, right? So we have like the concept, did God create reality? Did evolution create reality? Or was it intelligent design by a being? So intelligent design doesn't diminish that we can create our own reality, right? I mean, and that's like kind of what like the demiurge with like a lot of these things talk about, is that this potential simulation was created by something, that our physical form was created by something, but then we ascend and evolve to a level where we can now start to become a player in the game of our physical reality and start to take that into our own hands. But were cavemen able to do that? Probably not. At the time of Jesus, maybe only Jesus and the Essenes and that crew was able to. Or maybe only the Egyptians were able to, the pharaohs were able to. Maybe just only small sectors of people were able to, but that the average person was not able to. And as like the technology continues to evolve and continues to change, consciousness is reflecting the technology. So we're operating at a higher level that now we can become manipulators of the reality and of the energy too. But even when we're younger, a lot of times we're not able to do that. Where do people go when they astral travel, quantum jump from this simulation? Okay, Ash. I'm not going to answer that question because Chelsea answers it in the podcast. I actually asked like that pretty much same. I didn't ask it about simulation. I asked about this world, which we're talking about as a simulation right now. But I was like, where are people going when they astral travel? What is the difference between astral travel and shamanic journeying? And she answers all of that really well. Oh, hi, Eden. Let's see. Do you think the age of Aquarius is bringing on the evolution of mankind? Yeah. So the age of Aquarius, I feel like it's been unfolding for a long time. If you ask astrologers, they say it hasn't come yet. If you ask other people, they say that it's been starting since the 1960s. So one of the things also on the podcast, okay, Ultra Minds podcast on YouTube. The first episode is with Evan Nathaniel Grimm. And when I ask him about the age of Aquarius towards the end of the episode, and he talks about, in one of the best explanations I've heard of it, is although we will not know the exact time of it, he explains it similar to like Mercury retrograde, right? So we have the days of Mercury retrograde, but a couple days before and a couple days after, you're in like the pre-shadow or shadow of the retrograde. So even though you're not in the retrograde, there's a couple days before and after that are affected by the retrograde, similar with the moon, right? Like we have the full moon, but like a day or two before or a day or two after is affected by the full moon. So that's what he explained as the age of Aquarius. Now, if an age of Aquarius like is so big of a cycle, whereas the moon is just a small 28-day cycle, the age of Aquarius is like a several thousand year cycle or something like that. That shadow period before and after is also wider. So we can already be in the pre stages where you start to get that energy. So guys, Ultra Minds podcast on YouTube, JK Ultra. Episode 1 is Evan Nathaniel Grimm talking about the pole shift, the earth shift, the astrology of the coming years, the astrology of the new earth, what's going to be happening between now and 2029. And then we go into 2050, 2060. What are some of the changes of technology? Next, we also have the episode I was talking about with Kara Elizabeth, and she has a animal deck where all things animals that come in our reality are actually reflections of something that is happening within us. And now she has a deck that she's working on called Body Tech, about how the body is the greatest technology and that it's mirroring outside of us. So we have a whole discussion that's super beautiful about that. And then coming out on Tuesday, we have with an episode with my best friend, Chelsea Maker, who is a shaman. And she actually answers a lot of these questions about astral travel, shamanic journeying. We talked about demons. We talked about all of this other stuff. So you guys know what to do. Subscribe, put your notifications on, like this live. And on the podcast, it's more so to interview the guest. And then Tuesday Night Live. Oh, yes. And Marcella, too. I was forgetting. And Marcella, episode 2, is incredible. So Marcella Kroll, who I don't have her deck next to me right now, but I'm always using her deck. So Marcella also had some really unique, interesting stuff to talk about because it talked about autism and psychic abilities, which we know is a very hot topic now, but also being of like mixed cultures. So being part indigenous and part white or part this or part that, and really having like mixed ancestors and like working with mixed ancestors, right? Because that's something for, we live in this melting pot of reality right now where most people who are living in the US and even around the world, but especially in the US, have mixed lineages from different places. And when they're tapping into their ancestors, when they're tapping into their gifts, they're tapping into their magic. They might even have like ancestors that are opposing each other, that are well, that are unwell. And then also too, this kind of being autistic as well as having spiritual gifts and being able to navigate that. And then towards the end of the episode, she has this incredible psychic self-defense is where she talks about the internet as a haunted space. So basically like kind of like going to a graveyard or going to a haunted house is also like a similar, because you know those are kind of like pathways, doorways between realms, how the internet and social media is also one of those things. So, you guys, if you have not listened to all the episodes of the podcast, there's only 4 episodes. Make sure you go do that. And the last thing I'll say before I go, I'm updating my thumbnails, okay? So, don't judge me for doing the corny YouTube judge thumbnails, okay? Because I blame porn. I know I'm getting too far here, but I blame porn for this shit that like every video has to be like, and it's just embarrassing, okay? And it's embarrassing and it makes it so cringe. And the punk rock teenager inside of me hates it. But I'm not going to put all this GD work into the podcast to then have the episodes not be watched because I'm trying to do a cool aesthetic thumbnail. So thanks to the porn, thanks to Mr. Beast for his on every video that basically, unless you do a stupid fucking face on YouTube, nobody will watch it. So go when you see my stupid face on these thumbnails, go and watch it, go and click it. And there's where it is. Okay. And then what I'm going to do next is I'm going to be doing all of the Tuesday Night Live thumbnails again. So, yeah. So when you see me doing that, you know why. Okay. Well, anyway, guys, thank you for being here. Uh, oh, thank you. Yeah, doing the O faces to drive traffic to algorithms. I know. Isn't it embarrassing? Thankfully, Chelsea helped me with it today. I was like, "Look, I need some guidance." She's like, "Okay, surprised, bewildered, shocked. You knew it already. You think they're lying. You think they're telling the truth." And she was like pushing me through like different emotions, cuz how do you do that, right? Like just yes, when you see the new thumbnails, enjoy it, smile, enjoy them. Okay, guys, thank you so much. Let's talk about the telepathy tapes. Okay, I'll put it if I have time to watch it in the next week. Um, I'll try to watch it. People have been asking me to watch it for a while, so I'll try to watch it. Maybe that will be on the list on Instagram stories. JK Ultra underscore Jen. We have. Oh my God, you're doing the O face. we have the um we have the I don't know. Anyway, go watch it. We're good. That's it. Thank you, everybody. Thanks for Tuesday Night Live. See you on the next one. Bye, everybody. And then, yes, Chelsea coming out on Thursday. Bye, guys. Oh, yeah. Telepathy tapes. I'll try to watch it. If not, I'll do a poll on my Instagram for the things. But Soul Contracts ended up coming in first place after I already closed the polls. So maybe we'll do that next week. But also personal life. Personal life is a little juicy right now. So maybe you guys want to vote for that. But okay. Bye.